Unsatisfied. That's what the therapist told me. Dr. Kelly, in her hyper-tight jeans with a blouse unbuttoned too far. "Oh, just come in, Finley. I'm getting out the shower." I'd have told her to shove it months ago, but the sessions were free, and as Charlie kept reminding me, I bloody needed it. "Let's talk about death again, Finley." It was a Friday morning. It was always a Friday morning when Dr. Kelly deigned to see me. All the sessions were done at her house, a gigantic suburban pile that I had to drive to and get there half an hour early trying to find somewhere to park. As far as I knew, she lived alone in there, and in my nastier moments I imagined the string of divorces. This little goblin sat there cackling over piles of gold slipping into her greedy palms. In fairness, she was hot. In about her late 30s, if I was any judge. By that stage in my life, the swirl of hormones that had turned me into a rampaging stud in my 20s had settled. I loved the fact that Charlie was genuinely the only woman I actually wanted to look at. Sure, I could feel my eyes drawn by a low-cut top, especially these days, but in actuality the curiosity was nothing more than a fleeting fancy. And that was partly why Dr. Kelly pissed me off so much. She knew I wasn't interested, but she couldn't stop herself flirting. "Whose death?" "No one specific." She had long blonde hair, perfectly straight normally, but it was still damp from the shower, and she was twirling a strand as she spoke. Indeed, the white blouse she was wearing was see-through in a few carefully chosen places. I manfully averted my eyes, doing my best to piss her off. "Concepts again?" Dr. Kelly was big on concepts. Concepts of life, money, death, happiness, you name it. She seemed of the opinion that the human experience was nothing more than a series of concepts, awkwardly shoved together in a line. How about the concept of gold digging? "When we first met, you told me that you were in the business of death." That had been a mistake, as it turned out. Been more of a tongue-in-cheek joke, a sort of dark British humour I like to tell people to shock them, but she pounced on it like a cat on a mouse. A black widow? And hadn't let go. I'd had a cat when I was a boy, a ginger Tom with a personality like burning sandpaper. I'd once watched him torture a mouse for 54 minutes before killing the poor bloody thing. I tried chasing him away, but he kept managing to avoid me. Suddenly, an image of Dr. Kelly with a scowling and squashed ginger face shot into my mind, and I found myself fighting an epic battle not to burst out laughing. It was a joke. But like all good jokes, it was true. I shrugged. "I'm in private security." "I know what you do, Finley. Your company pay me for these sessions." She smiled. Ginger cat, mouse, torture. "Come on, what are you getting at then?" "So impatient. Does Charlie think you're impatient?" If I hadn't spent most of my adult life being shot at, I might have been caught out by the left hook she swung past my guard, but instead, I just shrugged. "Yeah. Can't say I know many married blokes that are different, though." "Bet you've known a few." "So?" She seemed to pause to consider for a moment, and that set my warning bells off. I knew what she was building up to. The question, at least in the minds of people who've never taken a life. They imagine that it's the key factor that defines us, the score we engrave on our rifle stocks, and the boasts we tell in the pub every Friday night. Couldn't be further from the truth. "How many?" I asked, scepticism practically dripping from every word. She actually looked caught out. That was a first. "Well, yes, that's where I was going." "I don't know exactly. Somewhere around 200. "You don't keep score?" I allowed my face to dip into a momentary frown, just for a second. A warning. Those are people's lives we're talking about. I might kill them, but I don't disrespect them. Realising she'd crossed the line, she stepped back, circled the prey, and lunged from another direction. "What about people you've seen die around you? Friends, colleagues?" "Some," I allowed. "Did their deaths ever make you want to stop?" I shook my head. "Never." "Even though you knew you could be next?" I never really let it bother me. "Why though? Surely life is the most important gift you have." "Yeah, it's not that I didn't care. I just didn't see the point in worrying about it. I train, to mitigate the risk as much as possible, so I've taken all the steps I'm capable of to stay alive." "Were there any points where you thought you were going to die?" "Several." "Tell me about one." I shrugged. I was in a European country. We kicked in a door, and it was a trap. 2 of my guys were wounded badly, and we started getting shot at from behind, which cut off our exit route. The only option was to fight forward, so I did that, dragging the wounded guys with me, but then I was stuck in a building with a bunch of bad guys, all armed and all trying to kill me. She was watching wide-eyed, biting her lip. How did you get out of it? I just waited them out. I treated our guys the best I could and waited for the bad guys to lose patience. When they came close, I dealt with them and just kept doing that until the rest ran away. Did you enjoy it? That one threw me, showing that Dr. Kelly wasn't as dumb as I gave her credit for. I made it out alive, I suppose. And your wounded friends? One of them didn't make it. So no, in answer to your question, that sucked. Big time. She gave a little smile at that and adjusted her position in the chair, as though preening, pleased with herself. Finley, do you know that's the first time that you've admitted to something not being perfect with your job? I blinked several times and allowed myself a frown. Was that true? Do you have problems at work? Sometimes. There are challenges, people I don't necessarily like. How do you deal with them? I learned in the army that you can't pick who you're in a platoon with, so you may as well get along with them. And she stopped as I gave a visible sigh of frustration. Am I annoying you? I sighed again. No, yes. It's just you're dancing around the question and we both know it. The answer is no. Killing people doesn't bother me. Losing my friends does, but I've dealt with that. That's not why I'm here. She smiled patiently. I know. But it's my job to make sure we've covered all the different chains of thought that lead to that conclusion. Oftentimes, even when we're completely certain of something, we explore the logic behind it and find there are cracks in our thought processes. Fine. Shall we continue? No. Let's cut to the chase. She smirked. But you must admit I was right about one of your firmly held beliefs, Finley. Oh? You're impatient. I scowled and settled back into the chair. Unsatisfied. There. Is that the chase you wanted to cut to? I nodded. To be honest, the fact that she put her finger on it pissed me off. When she'd first come out with it as a conclusion for my mental state, I'd immediately dismissed it, but the more she'd circled back, the more I found myself agreeing. Stupid woman. Do you love your wife? Yes. Do you ever have sex with other people? Never. Emotional connections? No. Do you have any female friends? No. What about your children? She hesitated as though searching for their names, but I hadn't told them to her. They're great. Really? Even at 2 a.m? I shrugged. Yeah, it can be difficult when you're tired. I've done harder things though. Dog? My best mate. House? It can always be bigger. Job? Love it. Like being in the army, except I get to spend almost every evening at home, get paid about 1,000,000 times more, and there's no bullshit. Bullshit? I snorted. The army is all bullshit. In peacetime, it doesn't know what to do with itself, so it makes up bullshit to justify its existence. That was a quote nicked from a former 2-2 SAS operator who had been about as pissed off as it was possible to be without murdering anyone. What else is significant in your life, Finley? That's about it. No other hobbies? Stopping bad guys and making new ones. That one took her a moment before she forced a laugh. Would you say that you enjoy making people uncomfortable? Only if it's funny. And if it's not? Then no. Dr. Kelly's eyes danced with something approaching frustration. I had to remind myself that I was here for a reason. It was fun having her on the ropes like this, but... Come on then, Finley. You're running circles around me today. What's your end goal from this? It was a skillful riposte, if expected. She had thrown the ball back into my court, and I let it hang for a moment, giving my brain the chance to drop the witty retort it was preparing. I feel like there's something major missing from my life. Dr. Kelly gave a tiny little smirk of self-satisfaction. It was barely even a twitch of the facial muscles as she crossed her legs, but I spotted it. I thought of the ginger cat again and had a brief image of her cocking her leg up in the air and licking. We've identified the major parts of your life. There's home life, and then there's work. Is that accurate? I nodded. You assure me that both are as, what would you say, optimised as is possible? Yes. Do you think that you're a good father? I try to be. And you're a good husband? I nodded again. But what does good mean to you in those contexts? That earned her another shrug. Loving, being present, teaching, supporting. She cocked her head over. Yes, those are all quite generic though, aren't they? Or perhaps we'd be better off saying universal. Anyone could tell me that was the best way to be a husband and a father, even if they were single and childless. She paused and adjusted a part of her blouse that was sticking to her. I kept watching her face. People form rules in their minds about complex emotional situations like these. Indeed, for almost any social interaction, it's perfectly normal. We're social animals at the base level, so we have inbuilt instincts to establish boundaries and to ensure we surround ourselves with others who share our beliefs and rules and the values that we hold dear. She really wasn't an idiot. I'd have to remember that one. It seems to me that as a man you're fulfilling the sort of positions in life that most in the 21st century can only dream of. You're a husband, a father, and you embody the image of the warrior. You're in combat on a weekly basis. It's not that often. Regularly, then. And you don't find yourself facing questionable morals. As you say, you only fight bad people, which means you epitomise, particularly in your own mind, all the ideals that make you a man. She was right, but then again, ChatGPT could have written that summary for her. I waited. When it comes to rules, I want you to try and establish what those are for the different situations you find yourself in. It doesn't mean changing your behaviour. In fact, it's the opposite. You need to establish what your reasons are for behaving the way that you do, to quantify it. Are you following me? Yes. You want me to establish why I think the things I do are morally right. She smiled, revealing teeth that must have been whipped into shape by Invisalign. Correct. Can you do that for me? I can do it for me. Yes. I stood, tugging the back of my t-shirt down. Her eyes lingered on my arms and shoulders. Same time next week? 2 weeks. She stood too, extending her hand. I noticed she kept her arm at almost a right angle, meaning I had to step closer to her to shake it. I resisted the urge to smile as I extended my own arm to an almost comical distance and barely moved as we exchanged the formality. Bye. I let myself out, turning right along the quiet suburban street. I pulled out my phone and dialed Charlie. Hey. So, she was in the shower when I got there, and then put on a white blouse that was sticking to her and basically transparent. My wife creased up at that down the phone. You managed to avoid shagging her then? It was tough. There was a lot of low-lying furniture in that room. If I tripped over it, I reckon I'd have fallen straight into her. Charlie did a laugh snort, and then I was chuckling too, as I finally found the car, confirmed I hadn't got a ticket, and slid into the driver's seat. Did she give you any more insights? Charlie's voice was playful, but there was serious weight behind it. I'd left the army and taken this job at her urging. She had flat out refused to have children if I was going to be away for months at a time, and I'd agreed, but the deal had been that I had to see the therapist. Fortunately, the company had seen too many of their former SF employees go down dark paths, and were all too happy to drop me in it with Dr. Kelly. Still, I had to admit the disturbingly horny woman was onto something. I briefly explained to Charlie about the rules, and she seemed to get it. Yeah, that makes sense. Why don't you try and work out what you think people shouldn't do first? That might help you see where the boundaries lie. I paused for a moment as the engine started. You're very clever, dear wife. That's why you married me. That and shh. The government are probably tapping the call. I laughed at her, and she made one gentle foray into the world of persistent nagging. Try talking to people at work about it. You know I won't. Love you? Love you. I pulled out and set Google Maps for work, running through the couple of hours of training scenarios we were planning for that afternoon. Fridays we knocked off mid-afternoon, so I had to race to get the most out of the time available. It occurred to me that despite my cocky thoughts, Dr. Kelly was actually the one running rings around me, because in our sessions so far, she had drawn out a single word I used to describe myself that rocked the foundations of the near-perfect life I was building, and I found myself muttering the question under my breath as I merged behind a bus. What the hell have you got to be so unsatisfied about, Finley? Gazer. Hello, old chap. Both of us leaned hard into our respective accents, Craig's pure urban Essex, and mine what he would call posh, despite that just meaning I came from the south. Looney bin full up? Yeah, funnily enough, they all sounded and looked like you. Is that where you go for Christmas? Finley, you're a soldier of fortune, not a stand-up comedian, Ross complained from in front of his own kit cage, a dozen or so metres down from mine. Sorry, sir. Thought I'd left the army. Well, some of us were sensible and never joined, so I couldn't tell you. Ross was one of those rare breeds, a professional who'd never worn a uniform. Self-taught to a degree, he'd had the good fortune to be born on a street in Wales that had birthed 3 UK Special Forces operators, and he'd learned more over beers in the local than most of us have forgotten in over a decade of doing this job. Maybe it's your job security you're worried about, I suggested to him seriously. Are you hoping they'll get you a passport if you stay long enough? I'd never accept a nationality that didn't involve a dragon. He forced a degree of Welshness back into his voice, which had mostly faded. Or a sheep, Craig put in. This is the sort of racism that should be dealt with by HR. Didn't know you could spell that? Craig was whip fast again. I had to lean against the door and dissolve into helpless giggles at that. Even Ross was trying to keep his face straight and failing. He swung open the door to his own equipment cage and muttered as he vanished inside. Still chortling, I checked my watch and mirrored his actions, scooping up the various tools of my trade, feeling the familiar weight as they settled over me. Oi, English! Ross had appeared at my door, standing so Craig could hear. Want to go minimalist today? I looked at the helmet and night vision that were currently filling my hands. Reason I ask is that bloke who stormed the secondary school in Brixton. See that in the news? Yeah, I made a face. No one got hurt, did they? He got filled in proper, Craig told us. School was by Angeltown, lucky he didn't get stabbed. Point is, the guy who ran in and stopped him was an off-duty retail security guard. Only weapon he had was a torch, and he went sprinting in and belted the bloke over the back of the head. What, you want to run the shoot house with just a torch? Ross rolled his eyes. Maybe a little more than that. He pointed at my helmet and nods. Lose those? Craig was hefting a lightweight chest rig. This? Ross was thinking. How about... Right, here's a scenario. Got to get to a civvy place on foot in London. What can you take with you that you conceal? I shrugged. That's a standard counter-terror op. Done that 1,000 times. Ross scowled, his civvy background showing him up for a moment. Right, but say it was happening around the corner from here and you just had to grab and go and run for, say, 5 minutes. What would you take? The banter had subsided as we worked the problem. Counter-terror police would probably just have a pistol and a single mag. We all blanched at that. Nah, you can get a rifle. Craig made a great show of trying to hide his down his trousers. I know. Ross turned and vanished, returning a moment later with an empty fabric guitar case. Bought this years ago. For this express purpose? Craig asked. You sure you aren't a terrorist? Freedom fighter. We chucked 3 rifles into the case, set about shoving magazines into various pockets. Turned out you could get a lot into normal civvy clothes. Let's run with that, Ross urged, and we headed out to the shoot house, where the other operators that formed our team stared at us in disdain. Still, it was a fun afternoon, and we knocked it on the head at 2, depositing kit back in the cages and heading to the dining room. God, I love the private sector. I said it every time we ate a meal here. The entire complex was bang in the middle of London, taking up enough ground that property developers must have been queuing up to make offers on, except the company had left it looking like a normal stand of office buildings, hollowing out most of the interior to form our storage and training areas. None of the neighbours had a Scooby about what we were doing there. Absolutely no expense had been spared on the facilities. A buffet of world-class food sat waiting for us, and the chefs, a wonderful couple who lived down the road, were beaming and welcoming as always. Afternoon, Fiddly. Afternoon, chef. I knew his name was Bob, but I'd never called him that. Like everyone here, he had his place in the organisation, and that was how we knew each other. He ladled Boeuf Bourguignon onto my plate, glanced dramatically left and right, then added a final massive ladleful. Couldn't have you going hungry now, could we? Thanks, chef. I grinned and headed away to find a seat. Craig joined me a minute or so later. How'd you get so much? Hearts and minds, mate. Nah, I think it's mostly sirloin. Ross sat opposite. Surely there's some skin in the game, no? Craig's has got elbow grease floating on top. It's a Chelmsford delicacy. God, I love the private sector. Yeah, I think it's seeing someone, mate. The mess room slowly filled with operators, a surprising mix of sizes and shapes. Our team of 3 were of course the hard hitters who kicked in doors with guns in our hands, but the company supplied a number of specialist roles, and the day was rapidly passing where everyone had to be over 6 foot and wrapped in muscle. I frowned at that as Craig, following a long pause to attempt a full clearance of his plate, resumed the banter. Of course, Finney's here's got his rules. You ever seen his little black book, Ross? That's where he writes down all the bad guys he's put in the ground. They're in alphabetical order, or they would be if he could read. Arabic's a hard language, I protested, mopping up sauce with homemade bread. Nah, Craig chewed thoughtfully for a moment. It's more like the 10 Commandments. I must not cheat on the missus. I must not fail to clean my plate. I must always call Bob chef. I flicked a pea at him and scored a direct hit in his left eye, eliciting a yelp. Why can't you shoot like that when we're working? I only shoot bad guys, Craigster, and I caught a flash of old Nick just then. The jokes paused as our immediate boss, Paul, entered the mess room and made a beeline towards us. Afternoon, gents. Sorry to disturb you. All right, Paul. Yeah, email should be coming through on the net in a few, but CT have asked us to support over the weekend. Seeing my dismay, he held up both hands. It's an on-call type job only. I know we aren't contracted for it, so trust me. The bill we send will be bloody extortionate. Finley, I know you've got the family, so you're bottom of the list behind these two. Best I can do. I scowled, but we all nodded. At the end of the day, none of us were the sort to turn down helping someone, and Paul knew it. He made a big deal of thanking us before heading off to claim some stew of his own. Must be a big one if they're wasting cash on us. Ross was looking thoughtful. Notting Hill this weekend, isn't it? Nah, it's next. Craig shook his head. Hope this doesn't start becoming a regular feature. It was a sign of how tight we were as a team, that the sanctity of my family weekends being threatened bothered the both of them too, and a few minutes later as we went into the secure briefing room, that showed. Christ, I muttered, reading the threat package. No wonder they wanted us. Seems an odd time to tack a school. Ross reached out and scrolled the massive touchscreen in front of us. Saturday and all that. Activities and classes, I explained. Thanks, Finn, I did go to school. I rolled my eyes. No, most weekend activities are held in schools. Easiest place because they're already set up for it. We do karate in the school on a Saturday afternoon. Oh yeah? Have they given you a belt yet? It was a tough one, very close to home. I went through the familiar process of memorising faces, times, and the salient details that would enable me to do my job should the need arise. At the bottom was a number with a pound sign after it that raised morale, but I couldn't ignore the fact that the entire package was unsettling. Well, Craigie and I will go first if the balloon goes up. I appreciated that, and so didn't argue. You'll keep me in the loop? Yeah, it'd be better off without you, of course, but yeah, if I need someone to soak up incoming fire. We spent the next hour ensuring we covered all the details, testing ourselves on the finer points, and making sure that if one of us forgot something, the others at least had an idea of the error. That was our job. I texted Charlie telling her I'd get the children 10 minutes late, and she sent me back a yawning emoji. Whatever that meant. Mrs. giving you grief? Craig raised an eyebrow. Not yet. She will do if weekend work becomes a thing. Craig was single, but we both had our reasons for leaving the military, and taking back control of our off time was a key factor. I knew he wouldn't be happy about the sudden change, but then again, Paul wouldn't have pressed this one on us if it hadn't been so serious. Reckon she'll write you a note in your rule book? I sighed, pulled out the black-coated notepad and flicked through it dramatically for their benefit. Clear as a bell. I've never written anything down in the bloody thing. They stared askance. Why do you always have it then? Force of habit. Always had to have one when we were in uniform. When we went on that op in Scotland, I gave you that spare dry bag for the bloody thing. That's because you're a lovely chap. You... My teammate shook their head at my apparent foolishness. So how do you remember all your rules, Finster? Dr. Kelly's words sauntered back into my mind and I scowled. We all have our rules, don't we? Sure. Craig leaned back against the briefing screen, heedless of the sudden chaos he was sending the touchscreen into. We're the good guys. That's my rule. How do we make sure we stay that way? I pushed him. It was an odd facet of our job, one that I loved, that we could go from weapons-grade banter one moment to professional consideration of a problem in the next. None of us felt difficulty making the switch. It was a prerequisite of working in our team. We'd had previous candidates who were fantastic moving through a building with a rifle, but couldn't do the mental aerobatics that it took to keep up with our dynamic, and so we binned them off. Ross took a moment to consider that one. Suppose if we went on an op that was just to slot a bunch of unarmed civilians, I'd start asking questions. Fair. I glanced at the screen. What if the intel was good, though? There was a brief silence as we all considered target packages we'd seen in the past that had probably looked very similar to that. We've pushed back on intel plenty of times in this job, Craig recalled. There was that EU bloke that we asked about and never heard anything again since. Fair point, I allowed. If this is what happens when you have kids, then count me out, Ross grumbled. Are you trying to ask how we know we're the good guys? The room was dark apart from the bright screen, but I still flushed visibly. Something like that. They both snorted at that. We aren't the good guys, remember, Finster? We're the bad guys who protect the good guys from the other bad guys. I laughed at that one because it was genuinely funny. Suddenly, Dr. Kelly's speech about rules seemed silly. Craig underscored the morality. Shoot bad guys, rescue good ones. If they're pretty, get the number. Craig loves a pretty guy, Ross interjected. What do we do if we see something happening that we don't agree with? Oh, Christ, you've seen that shrink. Craig suddenly looked disgusted. Kelly or someone? I suddenly understood why Dr. Kelly dressed the way she did around the operators from our company. I tried not to think of Craig in that room and wondered if I should check which chair he'd sat on. She's nuts, mate. Always trying to put stuff in categories. I reckon people like that don't exist in the real world. They go to university, they go to a posher university, and then they write a book, and then people pay a king's ransom to listen to what they have to say. Never worked a day in their life, they've got nothing to say that's worth listening to. She was talking about these rules. I've heard this, Ross chimed in. Had a bird a while back who did, CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, right? She said there were times, like when you're angry at someone or pissed off, it's because they've broken a rule in your head. That's it. She was saying when you work out what those rules in your head are, you come to terms with what the person was doing wrong, and it doesn't bother you. I frowned. Something like that, anyway. Psychobabble, Craig muttered dismissively. Yeah, don't reckon that applies to what we do, Ross agreed. See bad guy, shoot bad guy, train endlessly so bad guy can't shoot you. That was pretty much it. I saw where they were coming from as I crawled through the traffic for the school run, but it didn't help much with the feeling. I wondered if Dr. Kelly had really been full of it, and simply wasn't experienced enough at life to understand what my problems were. That didn't bode well for my mental state, but I tried to put it to one side as my children chattered about their day, and we pulled into the driveway, heading towards the bright blue front door my wife had painted. Still, even as I smiled at the sight of my house, my perfect little family, and did my best not to get knocked over by the bounding energy of the dog, it was like a glaring neon sign flashing just at the edge of my vision. Unsatisfied. 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 The civilized world. Char, I called out as our son and daughter raced through the door ahead of me. Take your shoes off, I shot after them, wondering how you reminded your offspring that Daddy used to be a sergeant and was used to people doing what he said. The image of the warrior faded as my wife appeared in the kitchen, bestowing perfunctory hugs on the kids, which set my danger alarm ringing like a church bell in Ibiza. I pressed my lips together and made sure my boots went neatly away in the hall. Tea, was her only word of greeting. I nodded, forcing myself to meet her eyes. I'd long since learned that it was better to engage with these marital conflicts early on in order to head off a bigger storm ahead, although sometimes it paid to make sure you had a firm hold on something solid before the typhoon of fury blew you away. It was funny. I could parachute at night into a building filled with suicidal terrorists, and I'd have taken a bet that my heart rate wouldn't have gone at 10 beats over resting. But facing my wife when I knew she had a genuine bone to pick? That scared the shit out of me. Did you have a good day? I dared to ask, closing the hallway door. Fortunately, the kettle was boiling loudly enough that Charlie could pretend not to have heard me. She poured 2 cups, PG tips for me and Earl Grey for herself. Finally, after battering 2 bags around the inside of the china mugs, she turned and folded her arms. I suddenly wished I'd brought some body armour with me. Weekends? I decided it would be wise to stay silent. When you left the army, we had a deal, Finley. I sighed. Don't bloody well sigh at me. This isn't what we agreed. It's Friday afternoon, for God's sake. Is this going to happen every week now? Am I going to be like the rest of those sad old bitches moping around the pad, wondering who my husband is off shagging this week? I told you this job could not be that. It's a last-minute thing. Big security. Let me make this very clear to you. Charlie's anger was intense, but brief, and it was already burning itself out. But I knew I had to let her make her point before giving a counter-argument. I don't care if we're under threat of nuclear annihilation. My husband is not available outside of the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m, Monday to Friday. Do they understand that? I gave her a minute to sip tea, and then told her about the threat. That mellowed her a bit. A little bit. How many soldiers in the British Army? I sighed. They don't deal with terrorism. They fought a war against terrorists for 20 years, Finley. How many police in this country? How many blokes in the special forces? I sighed. I was starting to wonder if I'd suffocate soon from all the air I was expelling. Why does my husband have to be the one on call like some spotty-faced junior doctor? We're past all of this. You're a professional now. It's just... The problem was she was right, and I knew it. We'd only agreed on this career path because it worked for all of us, and the second it stopped was the second I went and found an office job. Maybe ran my own business. It wasn't strictly 9 to 5. I still had to travel a few times a year, but it wasn't much, and I had plenty of notice. I knew Charlie was so sensitive because of those long months I'd been gone before we were married. She'd been on board with the idea at first, but then the sheer pace of life in the military had shocked her. First one deployment, then back home for a night, then get ready for this rotation, then another and another, and when she put her foot down, I'd got it. There had to be a limit, and now with my Gucci job threatening to undo years of hard work in one fell swoop, she was scared. Did you even push back? Did you argue with Paul at all? No. Why not? I opened my mouth to explain the threat, but she'd already heard that. Instead, I licked my lips and thought about what really mattered. Shit. I should have pushed back on that. This wasn't a good idea. We always agreed that if the job didn't work for all of us, you'd chuck it in. I felt a sinking feeling in my chest at the thought of Ross and Craig, but, well, they better than anyone knew the score. Charlie was right. I'd let this happen and I should have pushed back. I'll ring Paul now. I nodded and pulled out my mobile, wondering if this was the first step in a short journey to unemployment. I stepped into the downstairs study, which we both used on the rare occasions that we needed a place to work at home. I realised as I glanced at the pictures on the wall in here that it wasn't just my wife who was pissed off. I was angry too. Angry with Paul, with myself, with the monsters who'd made the threat that had got my company involved in the first place. It wasn't the threat of danger. I've been dealing with that my entire professional life. But instead the audacity of that system, the dangerous life and death world that was my profession, to intrude into this place, the sanctuary where my children ate and slept, where my wife could be sure no phone call was going to sweep her husband away for months at a time, and where the dog knew he was going to get a bloody good run because his master was in the top 1% of fitness for his over-evolved species of great apes. A bit of my anger might have leaked into my tone when I called my boss, because I was midway through briefing him up like I was back in the regular army, before I remembered that we were mates, and I could probably have done this a bit differently. Sorry, Paul, I muttered. This weekend gig has got me a bit worked up. This sort of shit is exactly why I left the army, you know? Yeah, I know. I know Charlie will be taking it too. Listen, mate, this is the only time in yours and my life there's been a credible threat like this one from a mysterious group. Look, if I thought we were actually going to get pinged to do something, I'd have thrown this back at corporate and told them to shove it. But the deal is we get on-call pay the entire weekend, scratches a few of the right backs at the security services. Otherwise, I wouldn't be touching it with a barge pole. I heard him sigh. Maybe I made a bad decision here, mate. Should have run it through you lads properly first. Paul had worked in our industry long enough that I didn't have to reassure him with lies. He'd been wrong to take the job, and he knew it. Have the lads spoken to you? I told him Ross and Craig understood, and he snorted. Not much chance of them deploying without you, anyway. Look, mate, say sorry to Charlie for me. We'll catch up properly on Monday. Try and enjoy the weekend, yeah? Yeah, thanks, mate. He hung up, and I had to take a moment to repress the urge to curse, because now, more than ever, I felt the surge of that same stupid emotion. Unsatisfied. What the hell was my brain looking for? I'd just done the exemplary thing in fixing a mistake, acting as the epitome of the husband and father, ensuring my family and I had dedicated time together over the weekend. I couldn't see anything wrong with what I'd just done, and as I realised before the call, it was what I wanted to do, not just Charlie. So what was I missing? What was I searching for? Why are you so fucking unsatisfied, Finley? I spoke out loud to myself, freezing as the door to the study opened, but it was only the Labrador who looked inquiringly at me, his tail wagging as our eyes met. I sighed and shook my head, aiming the gesture at myself rather than the innocent canine. Finn? Go on, backwards. Go backwards. Bloody hell, reverse, you dense mutt. I had to scratch his ears to apologise for that one as we went into the living room. There's a football match on tomorrow, Charlie exclaimed as I walked in, eyeing the youthful feet on clean sofas. I stared at her. Is there? Yeah, Dad, it's at school, 5-a-side, and we're both playing. I frantically racked my brain to check this wasn't something I'd forgotten about, but my memory pronounced me not guilty. The school forgot to tell anyone. Charlie was baffled. I've just put it on one of the mum groups, and it's literally only Iggy's mum was told about it. Is Iggy any good? She ignored that. The deputy head has just confirmed it's going ahead at the school tomorrow. I got her indignation, but to be honest, I was happy. There was something for us to do. Come on, it'll be a laugh, I encouraged her, putting an arm around her shoulders. I know, it's just their organisation lately has been awful, and with this weekend thing... She tailed off. Nah, come on. Kids, JD Sports is open until 7. Should we go and get some football kit? Cheers sent the dog spinning around in circles chasing his tail. Charlie rolled her eyes. Aren't they giving out kit? I already have my car keys. Dunno, don't care. Tell you what, let's get Chinese on the way home. Winning, winning, winning. Top dad, top husband, top professional at work. So why, Finley, can't you just be happy? Mixing work with pleasure. Lads, have you seen the payslip today? I opened the app and checked the secure server as Charlie drove us over to the school. The streets were weirdly deserted, being a Saturday, and Charlie muttered that she'd known the traffic was fine on this route. Yeah, not when there's a billion other parents driving this way. I don't know why you don't just get the bus. I hate buses, they're full of people. The world is full of people. Dad's made a few less people, our son piped up from the back seat. Yeah, but I made you two. Gross, that's disgusting, Dad. It shut them up though and glossed over a difficult moment as I checked the amount of money work were bribing me to whisk my weekend with my family. I shot Charlie a sideways glance and showed her the screen. Just for one weekend? We were at a red light, her eyebrows disappearing above her hairline. When I nodded, she shook her head. It's not enough. No number is enough. I murmured agreement as we pulled into the school car park. Charlie spotted Phil and Margot, an American couple whose kids were the same age as ours. We pulled in next to them and I exchanged handshakes with Phil, who was looking bemused. Not how you saw your Saturday going, huh? He shook his head, leaning close enough that I could smell last night's booze on his breath. Got a bit loose after work last night, man. I am in a world of hurt. I snorted and clapped him on the back hard enough that he winced. That just made me laugh even harder as we headed for the gaggle of parents that was waiting outside the doors to the school. What, did they forget to unlock? I joked to the other parents, exchanging exasperated glances with Charlie. Admittedly, we were bitching too much now about the school. We'd have to start putting these little annoyances in perspective, but... Everyone! I heard the voice, prim and proper English, already filled with apologies, but still bearing the steel edge of a primary school teacher. I looked across the crowd to see Miss Hawthorne, the assistant head, standing with dishevelled hair and pink cheeks. Everyone, I'm very sorry to tell you that it seems you've been the victims of an elaborate hoax. Oh, Charlie pressed her lips together as groans sounded from the mixed crowd of 50 or so parents. I can't tell without seeing, but it seems this all originated from some WhatsApp messages. Now, my phone rang. Not my personal one, the important one. The one I always kept charged. The one that couldn't be put on silent. My stomach did a somersault. Not at what they might be calling for, but at the look Charlie was giving me right at that moment. I'll tell them to sod off, I mouthed at her, stepping away hurriedly as the electronic peal rang out. Phil gave me a nauseous glance as I ducked behind his oversized SUV, glancing back just once at the group. Finley. Mate, Craig, the balloon just went up. They don't need us, but I heard a name on the wire. St. Anne's. Fuck me, Craig. I'm there now with 50 kids and teachers. I straightened up, automatically looking back at the single-laned entrance into the car park. The entire facility was surrounded by a 10-foot-high wire fence and a barrier-controlled entry. It was always a nightmare at pick-up and drop-off. Most of us parked a couple of streets away and walked, rather than risk the congestion of the car park. If a panic started here with all these kids... stay on, Finn. Coordinating. Rossi is there now, mate. Oi, they think we were all brought here as a prank today. No one was meant to be here at all. Yeah. I imagined Craig passing the information over to whoever was running the counter-terror op. I could practically hear the wheels being set into motion because a direct threat of violence against a British primary school on a day where there are no children present is one thing. But this? Get the fuck away from my family. An intrusion into my personal life again. I made to walk back to Charlie and the kids, but stopped. If I urged them to leave now, enough people knew roughly what I did for a living that there might be a panic. Besides, what would I do if any of these people got hurt because I'd acted only to save myself and my family? Shit. I did the next thing my training had provided. Probably not a good move, and certainly not one you'd find in a textbook anywhere in the world, but... I awkwardly crouched down beside my car, reached under the passenger side door feeling the dampness of the underside of the vehicle. There, exactly where a security mirror would see, was a void, and if you pushed your hand up inside it, you found nothing. But if you rotated the wrist, ignored the pain for a moment and pressed... So... Carefully, I retrieved the object and shoved it under my shirt, heedless of the damp outer packaging. I stood quickly, shoving my dirty hand into my pocket, and found for the first time in a while, my heart was skipping along at a higher than normal rate. Was it the presence of my family nearby, or the knowledge that if I was forced to use the item I'd just removed from its hiding spot, there would be some very bloody difficult questions to answer in the near future? Shit! I had to get everyone inside the building without causing a panic. That was the next problem. And as I viewed the situation like that, I found myself settling into the familiar pattern. Work the problem. Deal with the next threat. ETA 7 minutes, by road. Craig and Ross were on the way. That meant they'd already been at work, leaving me to enjoy my family time. I knew they'd be bringing the cavalry. All right. Charlie's face smiled, but there was venom in her voice. I forced a look in return that might once have seen a bad description of a smile. Great, Finn. Now she's shitting herself. Miss Hawthorne was saying something. The kids were starting to get bored. I glanced back at the vehicle gate. Why don't we have the game anyway? Hawthorne stared back at me. We haven't. A private event. We've all turned up. The kids are all dressed. Why don't we go into the hall and have a kick around? A great cheer went up, mostly led by the children. I could feel Charlie watching me out the corner of my eye. We haven't done the proper risk assessment. We need a ratio of adult staff to children. The gymnasium has a standing risk assessment for sports activities, and we can supervise our own children. The paperwork will take care of itself. All you need to do is unlock the doors. Classic misdirection. I had no idea what risk assessment was needed, but I put the next action on her rather than us. Now everyone was looking to Miss Hawthorne, who flushed even deeper. Craig, I muttered, phone still at my ear. Still 6 minutes, no further intel. That meant they'd lost track of where the bad guy was. Eyes on you. I imagined the drone buzzing overhead and knew I had to get these people out of the open. Come on, it's freezing. Half the kids are in sports kit. It was 15 degrees, but I managed to give a dramatic shiver for effect. Hawthorne cracked. She dipped her head, audibly muttering, and shuffled over to the entrance doors, fiddling with her keys. The crowd surged forward, delighted chattering rising to a dull roar. Tell me, Charlie urged, seizing my arm as our two joined friends they'd spotted in the crowd. I hung back, scanning the entrance. What's going on? I forced a smile and lied. Nothing. We're fine. Her fingers squeezed my arm tightly enough that it hurt. There. I put the phone back to my ear as the doors opened and the first family strayed inside. I've got a white Luton van heading west to east towards the school entrance. Normal speed. Positive ID. Sit rep. Moving civilians inside the sports hall. Charlie watched with growing horror as the conversation played out. Her eyes met the van as it sped towards the entrance, slowing as the driver hesitated to navigate the tight turn. Behind us, everyone had gone in, and Hawthorne was waiting, looking askance. Finn? Miss Hawthorne, would you make sure the doors are locked behind us? I forced a smile over her confused look, and stepped far enough back that the automatic doors slid shut. Hawthorne sealed them, and I stared at the masses of glass, wishing they were ballistic-rated panels. Finn? Into the hall. Come on, sweetheart, let's find the kids. The Luton van driver had given up negotiating the barrier, and now simply rammed it off the bearings. Unable to move too fast, the vehicle crawled up the road towards the car park. A little voice in the back of my head was saying, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, over and over again. I could feel like opposing magnets, the two worlds that I existed in being forced together, rebelling all the while. This was not supposed to be happening. 4 minutes. You're going to be too late. Hawthorne had gone. I reached under my shirt and pulled out the dirty package, unwrapping the oilskin. The smell of gun oil filled the air as the pistol filled my hand. I loaded it and thought how feeble it looked against the Luton that was now picking up speed. The driver wouldn't be able to ram the main entrance due to the snaking switchbacks of the ramp the school had built for a disabled kid. Finley! Charlie's anger had turned to fear. Is that van? She couldn't get the words out. I turned to her. The WhatsApp messages must have been intentional. They've got ahead of the security services. And they're going to rampage through the building and shoot everyone they see. The next question might have sounded ridiculous to any other human being, but in that moment I understood. Is this because of you? I let her see that I wasn't lying and shook my head. She ran to find the children. Right, I've got a cig and 2 magazines. Roger that, mate. 3 minutes out. Kids are in the sports hall, Craigie. Some will have gone to the toilet. Maybe some of the parents went looking for the staff toilet. Roger that. I don't have PID for everyone in here. Roger that. The main entrance is sealed. They can't ram it because there's a barrier. Confirm vehicle stopping. I watched as 2 men stepped out the front of the Luton van, faces hidden behind black balaclavas. Confirm. Both with AK weapon systems. They marched around to the back and raised the rear door. Their friends stepped out to join them. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. The masked terrorist turned and and began to march towards the building. I faded to the right and went to work. What I do. I could hear the voices. I could even understand the words, although people might have been surprised to hear the language. Not one you caught much either in the UK or in the popular fiction surrounding this type of terrorism. They were spreading out, breaking into a jog now. Their heads moved left and right as they surveyed the building, looking for predetermined entry points. I watched through the mirrored window long enough to see them split into two distinct groups of 6. Bite size. 2 minutes. In 2 minutes they'd be in the school, and those rifles would be cutting a bloody swath across my sanity. I worked out the shortest route to the gym from here, and tried to recall what lay down the dark corridor in front of me. The gym was to the right, the sound of plimsolls squeaking on the hard floor audible even from here. So, did the reception classroom open out onto the playground there? I thought there was a fire escape. The sound of breaking glass confirmed that. I nodded, turning towards the sound and running forward on the balls of my feet, crouching low enough to stay below the level of the interior windows. I glanced in. 6. I whipped around and raced in the opposite direction, moving as quickly as stealth allowed. That was the junior room, wasn't it? A figure loomed ahead of me and I brought my weapon up, the muscle memory process of killing already commencing, and had to yank my control back into place as Phil came out of the shadows, shaking water off his hands. Fortunately, his face was aimed at the floor, and he missed the pistol as I shoved it behind my back. "Finn, make me jump, man!" "Anyone else in there?" "No, I was, Get to the hall, quick. There's a big announcement being made." I could see someone in the shadows behind him. "Oh, really? Because I thought..." I shoved Phil to the side at the exact moment the terrorist opened fire. Heavy bullets chopped the air beside us as I took a single step to the left and fired 3 shots. A sucking, groaning sound told me that this guy wasn't going back to Chechnya anytime soon. Phil was spluttering, but he was alive, and the element of surprise was gone. I nearly hesitated, wondering if I should run back to the gym and put my back against the wall, or, second pair of feet, a voice yelling in accented Russian, and I responded in the same language. "He's here! Fucker tripped over!" Words I'd learned on an operation back in the day. It didn't matter. It sowed enough confusion that the gunman hesitated, and I sent him to paradise. I moved forward quickly, stepping around the bodies. If I'd had more ammo, these guys would have received some more shots, but instead I was forced to separate them from their weapons. I slung the first weapon, identifying it as a short-barrel AKS-74U. Not bad. I'd never fired the bloody thing though, so I stuffed the dead man's ammo into my pockets, managing to collect 4 magazines. I checked his pulse, then grabbed his dead mate's rifle, opened the door to the toilet Phil had just vacated, and lobbed it into the stool. "Suka!" I managed to get a grip of the barrel and pivot my hips, but that motherfucker got off a burst on full auto. Ears ringing, I rammed the cig under his chin and blew the back of his head off. Fuck! Okay, not the most professional thing to let slip, but bloody hell that AK was loud in the confined space. Now I was at a disadvantage. I put the phone to my ear and couldn't hear a thing. Still, 3 down. Only now they knew I was here. I turned and ran towards the gym, seeing Phil was still hesitating in the lobby. Rifle round shredded through the air. Phil spun and went down hard, blood spraying across the floor. I dived for the closest doorway, smashing into it as the lock refused to budge. I whipped around, firing the pistol one-handed, decades of hardwired instinct forcing me to be accurate, and saw the round's impact, clipping the first of the 4, who was still aiming. I dropped the pistol, rammed the AK into a crude firing position, and blasted the first terrorist into oblivion. Then it became like a chaos drill. 1, 2, 3, back to 1. All the while they were firing at me, but they were as surprised as I was to see them, and they were standing. I was crunched into a doorway, and they all fired high, every one of them. Suddenly they were dead or dying, and I was staggering to my feet, reloading the AK, and I sprinted to the corner they'd emerged from, only to see the corridor was empty. 2 more that way, plus 3 more the other way. "Craig, 5 hostiles remaining, 1 civvy casualty. Breaching team preparing. Move your asses. Roger." "Finn!" Phil was still conscious, which was a miracle at close range with a large caliber. I glanced at him, seeing the blood pumping from his upper arm. "Get your belt off and tourniquet it." There was nothing more I could do for him. I put the last magazine into the cig, scooped up another AK mag off a body, and turned towards the gym. A blast of sound told me Craig and Ross were coming. Too slowly, though. 5 more. I ran, faster than any speed I'd ever clocked in military selection, or the stupid macho races we used to get into. My boots pounded on floors marked by the passage of hundreds of little feet. I let out a scream of frustration at the sound of machine gun fire opening up ahead of me. I cursed myself for dallying too long with the dead men behind me when the real threat had been closing in all along. Boom! The shot echoed off the walls of the corridor, awful in the confined spaces. My ears were already ringing with tinnitus as I heard the first high-pitched screams, and suddenly they were there, 3 men in front of me, and they must have been the ones firing because they didn't hear my approach. Fortune was smiling because at that exact moment as I came round the corner, they were laughing at one of their fellows who was slipping on the hot brass his weapon had just dumped onto the floor. I'd never seen red like this before. The bright open space of the gymnasium was behind them, silhouetting them, and that told me they'd just fired those weapons into that space filled with families and joy and innocence. When I killed people at work, I did it clinically, coldly. It barely affected me anymore. This time, though, all I saw were the faces of my family, and the only sensation was a moving through treacle like in some hellish nightmare. I wasn't even conscious of the sound the stolen AK made as I dumped the entire magazine at the terrorists, chopping into the 3 of them in the space it took for my heart to beat once. Chunks of flesh spun crazily away from them as they staggered into one another, going down a terrible pile of twitching ruin. Hands moving automatically, I changed magazines, stamped on a twitching corpse, and shoved my way around the corner of the gym. It was empty. A small pile of white rubble in the centre showed where one of the attackers had fired at the ceiling. Whether in frustration or to terrify the civilians, I couldn't tell. But I'd heard screams. Where the hell was everyone? "Craig, 2 left, I'm at the gym. Any eyes on the friendlies?" No answer. I swore, and moved as rapidly into the gym as I could, whilst maintaining some tactical bearing. My eyes landed on a few objects, boot bags, some brightly coloured rucksacks. Where on earth had they gone? 2 more. They could have killed them all by now. Did you check that last guy? I heard a sound behind me and whirled around, dropping to a crouch. The AK barrel was hot next to my bare hand, and I realised I'd never missed all the kit that usually adorned me more. Whiskey! Fuck me, lads, you took your time. Craig and Ross emerged, weapons first, into the gym, faces hidden behind gas masks and black full-body suits. Clearing the gym, Craig returned to the trio I'd just gunned down and proceeded to fire 3 more suppressed rounds point-blank into the corpses. Ross approached me and unslung my own rifle from around his torso. I snatched it up. They were here. I heard the screams. Got an exit straight ahead. I turned to the fire doors and realised I was so emotionally wrapped up in this that I was completely failing to maintain any objectivity around the job. I took a half step backwards to let Ross take charge and resolved myself. A scream, childish and drawn out, came from the weightlifting room above the gym. We all looked up at the window set high in the wall, and then as one, bolted for the fire door, slamming through it and taking the stairs 3 at a time. Neither of my mates told me to slow down. In fact, they raced me for the privilege of stopping this atrocity before it could evolve. We were neck and neck, 3 guys who, as Craig had joked, weren't the good guys here, but instead the guys that the good guys called when there were bad guys to be killed. We slammed through the emergency bar into a scene from hell. 50 parents and kids crammed into a room built for no more than 20. Silent tears filled every eye. Children clung to their parents. Husbands tried to stand in front of their wives, and there, one facing us, one aiming his weapon at the defenceless civilians, were the final 2 terrorists. The closest one fired, point-blank range. I seized his weapon by the barrel, burning the skin off my hand, and used the strap to haul him backwards into the stairwell, where I flung him to my mates. I heard a single scream, cut off abruptly. The second guy took one look at me, and I heard a click as he disengaged the safety catch on the AK, a weapon designed by hard men to fight desperate wars. An ugly tool made to take lives, to puncture through body armour and end the threat of a snarling warrior who was an equal to the soldier wielding it. Not to murder children. His finger was millimetres away from the trigger. It might as well have been 1,000 miles. I heard myself growling like a predator as I ripped him bodily off his feet, slammed back through the double doors where I tore the weapon from his hand, leapt on top of him and snapped a single word. Knife! Aftermath. I probably would have got a medal if I hadn't had an illegal firearm. Still, the criminal charges never arose, and the entire thing mysteriously went away, credit going to UK Special Forces, who didn't comment on the incident. No civilians died, and the police finally released the identities of 10 Chechenian and 2 Russian separatists, who went through some obscure religious and political bullshit, convinced themselves that machine gunning a bunch of innocent British schoolchildren was a good idea. The fact that one of them got cold feet and leaked some of the details to an MI5 operative only served to hasten their deaths. It turned out that the traitor was the first one I'd killed back in the corridors. I didn't waste a moment feeling sorry for him. The real outcome for me? No one tried to make me work the weekend again. That did wonders for my home life, but the reality came when Paul insisted I see Dr. Kelly again the following Friday. She was her usual simpering self, hair still wet from the shower, although this week she'd gone for a short skirt instead of a wet blouse. Do you feel satisfied now, Finley? Yes. That threw her. I saw her eyes flicker as the bluntness of my response struck her like a physical blow. Do you... I found the middle ground. Between? I looked around at the book-lined wall, the glimpse of the beautifully tended garden beyond. Everything here was for show, and that meant this was the one space where I could say what was on my mind. Between being a psychopathic murderer and a loving family man. A mixture of incredulity and amusement seemed to hover across her features. I watched with interest as the conflicting emotions battled it out. Do you mean you found the line in the sand, so to speak? The rules that you were searching for? I considered that for a long pause, looking at the ornate rug she had spread between the sofa I perched on and the chair that held her. Not the boundaries of the rules per se, but the point at which they ceased to matter. Dr. Kelly frowned, shaking her head. I learned last week that rules only apply so long as everyone agrees to them. But the second that someone decides to break them, that's where two conflicting paths of logic can cross one another. And that's where I belong. Do you mean that you see yourself as a rule breaker? Because that's the opposite of who you are, Finley. No. I shook my head adamantly. I wasn't making myself clear. It means that the way that I exist is in two separate worlds, each with their own strong set of rules. The problem has been that those two worlds cannot coexist, because the rules that govern them both are utterly opposed to one another. One advocates extreme violence, even sadism, while the other only thrives with love and security. And you found a space where the two could coexist peacefully. I let out a chuckle. Not peacefully, no. But they coexisted, do coexist, all the time. She didn't get it. How? I shrugged. Because the one needs the other to survive. Human beings can't just be pure chaotic violence and hunting the evil in the world the entire time. They need to come home and drink tea, hug their children and fart on the sofa with their wife. And the other world needs them too. Children can't grow up in peace and security without the careful eye of extraordinarily violent men being on them at all times, ready to unleash that violence on the evil people who hate progress, hate peace, and above all just want to make the world into their own version of hell. She was quiet for a long time after that. I got the distinct impression that she was deciding this was our final session together. Would you describe yourself as an evil person, Finley? Evil people don't exist. Only evil acts. I engage in evil acts, but only to protect good people. And that's who you are? That's the identity you've been searching for? I stood to leave and she didn't argue. The tension seemed to have gone out of her. She no longer eyed me up, but seemed to watch me warily, as though aware that she were a woman and I were a man in a room alone together. I stepped towards the door to give her space, turning back as I moved to speak my last words to her. It's not who I am. I'm many more things than even I can ever begin to name. But that crossover is where I find satisfaction. I'm the bridge between the different worlds. I'm the man who will act when needed to, in order to ensure that those who aren't able to act don't ever find themselves in the position where they have to do it. That's where I stand, guarding the bridge between those two worlds that I exist in, and making sure no one gets across from one world to the next. I grinned, showing her the darkness behind my eyes, giving her a small glimpse across the span of the bridge. Right there. That's satisfaction. I turned and left. Hello and thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the story, then please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories. For my novels, follow the link in the description box below to my Amazon page. You can follow me on both Instagram and Substack @Toby_author for both. My name is Toby and I write stories.